shortly.
All set.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Wednesday, April 21st. It's 4 o'clock. This is the Town Council Town Finance Committee meeting. It's a meeting where we're going to review a portion of the proposed budget. In specific, we're going to review the library, SEDCO, Public Works, and Community Services. With that, I'll call this meeting to order. And Colette, would you help me take attendance?
Certainly. Councilor Clucci,
Here.
Councilor Anderson,
Here.
Councilor Gleisteen,
I anticipate Councilor Gleisteen joining us, but I have not heard from her. So I think we'll get started and hopefully she can join us as we proceed.
thank you.
The next item is approval of minutes from March 24th and April 12th. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
I'll second that. Colette? Or is there any discussion? Sorry.
Nope.
Okay. All right. Colette?
Councilor Clucci,
Yes.
Councilor Anderson,
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes. And now we get to the heart of the meeting where we get to learn in a greater detail about the budgets being proposed to us. I appreciate you all being here. I know it's probably a bit of a stressful time, but myself personally, I'm looking to learn in greater detail than was provided in the book what is important to you, potential opportunities we might have to, we have a gap, as you probably are aware, any opportunities that you might see, but really just understand what you need to be successful next year so that we can balance that with any decisions we may need to make later on in the process.
John, if I could, I just wanted to suggest or mention to you, we've prepared a standard slide deck that each department is going to be using. They've populated, and it really makes sure that they provide kind of those 4 or 5 talking points that you, as a committee, identified that you want to touch on.
Right.
So you'll see a common theme here, and certainly we're available for questions.
So with that, Tom, I'll turn it over to you to introduce our first topic, which is the library.
Yeah, so we have Nancy Kroll, the library director here. Nancy has in fact prepared a couple of slides to kind of walk you through those key areas, and I'm sure she's available for questions if you like. So Nancy, without further ado, take it away.
All right, first slide. I get to show you the template here. The very first slide is essentially the overview of the budget that we presented. Most noteworthy is that our budget presentation this year is 5.1% below zero. And that follows last year's budget which was 2.7% below the previous year. Last year's reduction was a result of the council needing to make adjustments based on our COVID era. This year, the reduction is possible primarily based on our receipt of the payroll protection plan, which became a grant officially. So those funds have been made available and applied directly to the budget. We were able to sustain our work last year, in part because of the PPP over 2 years, but also we did do some reductions in payroll. We did experience some furloughs, fortunately very minor because of the PPP, but we also tried to restrict operations as much as possible. For much of the period, we were close to the public, so that helped us in saving a little bit of money in terms of operational costs for the building. We did introduce virtual as well as curbside services, so we have a very appreciative community. We learned a lot. We learned a lot of new technical skills and continue to fine-tune our opportunities for the future in that regard. We did find that we needed to shift more to the more expensive digital resources, and there will be a reflection of that in the budget. We increased our request for electronic resources by $3,000 and adjusted some of the funds away from some of our print materials to help supplement that particular line. We do expect next year to be a more challenging year, and I make note of that this year, so it's not a surprise next year. Certainly, the PPP will not be available next year. We'll do everything we can to continue to be very responsible in terms of any funds that come our way. But we do expect, rather than this year, that it will be next year that will be our major adjusting year. I did want to also make note of the fact that last fiscal year, we did change a position from a 32-hour position to a 40-hour position. And that adjustment was absorbed in last year's budget, but this is the first full year that you will see that reflected. So there is a reduction in our part-time line as a result of that 32 hours being moved into full-time. So I did want to make note of that. Next slide, please. Our current budget does reflect a COLA and step increase within the lines, and it's the COLA that's been used for all the other town departments. My salary was deferred. The increase in my salary for fiscal year 20 was deferred. I'm sorry, let me say that again, fiscal year 21. I did not take a raise last year. Let me put it a little more crassly. I didn't take a raise last year. So my raise for this year is based on the fiscal year 20 number, not the fiscal year 21 number. And obviously that was another strategy for us to help keep costs down. We did restore our training for this coming year. There is a salary adjustment line, which we have associated with a potential merit increase for deserving employees. And as I noted earlier, we did increase our request for supporting digital resources. Next slide. As you know, we have within the capital improvements budget, I think you've got that on another night, but I did want to make note of the fact that our expansion planning is scheduled at this point for November 2022. And we will be working on capital campaign activity, both a study that's underway right now, as well as actual fundraising activity. And that's very labor intensive. So within this budget request, under the new hours, it's mislabeled slightly. It's in your printed, it's called New Hours Adult Services. That is not accurate. It should actually be 8 hours a week for a part-time support staff member for the capital campaign activity. We did implement a fine-free policy in the last several months, and that will have a minor effect on the revenue, but more to the point, it's a very important initiative for us that represents a more equitable use of our, or offering of our library services. And it's an initiative that's being adopted by libraries across the country, many in our own state, and we've long wanted to do this. And this past year, our revenue was dropping so precipitously anyway. This seemed like the appropriate year to finally implement this. We also, for next year, will be working in terms of a new initiative, we'll be working with other community groups on a makerspace and a website called makermind.org. And at some point, we will be happy to do a little workshop with the council to give you more information about what that means. It should not have an impact on the budget, but it certainly is an initiative that we're very proud of and will be supported primarily by grant funding. Next. Our opportunity to reach our negative budget request this year is certainly a result of the payroll protection plan and the fact that we are now feeling comfortable enough to continue our annual fund goal of 52,000. In the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, we didn't feel that we were going to be able to raise the goal. And in fact, last year, we certainly did not raise that goal. This year, it looks like we are on track. And we do expect we'll have a healthy year, and our community is very generous. So we have included $52,000 in offsetting revenue. And then the federal funds is what the ARP is. And the Maine State Library is receiving over $2 million. Much of that is going to be used for programs for all libraries in the state. It's not necessarily trickling down to us directly, but there is a possibility that we'll receive a few $1,000s as part of that initiative. If that's true, we'll certainly inform the council, let you know that, and apply it to our operating expenses. It would most appropriately be used to offset our interlibrary loan courier service. Next slide. And the past year's budget reductions did impact our hours of operation, and some of particularly the part-time employees' schedules. We did delay COLA, as did town employees, to not be implemented until January. I mentioned that I did defer my salary, and then we did reduce our training. We were able to do a few workshops thanks to the support of the Friends of the Library. And that was particularly important this past year when we really needed to do some training in related to diversity and COVID safety. So there were a couple of different themes there that we really wanted to be sure we incorporated. Some of the training that did occur, the staff members paid for their own training. And next, happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Nancy. So I have a couple of questions. I don't know if my counselors want to go first, but I think that was a great presentation. I'm hoping that you can elaborate on a couple of things like makerspace. I've heard that term a lot, and especially in the schools. Can you maybe speak briefly about what that is?
Yeah, I actually had Tom Corbett, our IT person, give me a quick line of what that, because you can go on for many, many paragraphs about what it is, but his quick answer is, we're assisting Scarborough nonprofits with the creation and hosting of interactive digital storytelling and educational websites. And we will be partnering with area institutions and individuals to expand the website called makermind.org. It's an initiative to promote the makerspace concept in Scarborough and surrounding communities. And we already have it in place. There's a very large screen in the middle of the building, which is displaying everything from tours of the marsh to artwork to sound productions. And we have a committee of members of the public and business people who are working together to move this forward. We're working with some of the, particularly the marsh-based environmental groups to do tours of our marsh, flyovers, the Land Trust, the Friends of Scarborough Marsh, things that can be done visually to inform our community. But we're also very interested in supporting the creative arts. So some of this display that we have now are images of art that have been done by local artists. So we really want to offer an opportunity to support the arts and innovation community in a way that is collaborative.
I'm glad I asked. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome. And I do again want to reinforce that we're very proud to host it, but it really is going to be supported by a variety of organizations as well as grants.
I guess a less interesting topic with the PPP. Did you do a second draw?
No, we were not eligible because of our just the way we're organized and what we used it for. The first fiscal year was $20,000 we were able to use before the grant was actually awarded. So this year is $164,000 off the top of my head. So we split it over 2 fiscal years, and the larger amount is based on the fact the grant was finally awarded as a grant as opposed to a loan.
Okay. And my last question was just thank you for deferring your raise. It's appreciated.
Thank you.
John and Betsy, you have any questions for Nancy?
Yeah. I just want to make sure I understand. So just for my edification. So the PPP, Nancy, goes for 2 years, but in year 3, we'll likely see that 164 gone. And so your budget will automatically go up because that's for existing staff that's already in place, correct? It's not new staff.
Correct.
Okay. And the ARP stuff, like, I know there's a lot of uncertainty right now in terms of timing. So what are you hearing right now in terms of when you might have more confidence in knowing what the library's share of those funds are going to be? I think we're thinking on our end, right, Tom, we're thinking May-ish, we might have a better sense. I don't know where you said. I know the schools might be a little bit sooner. So just trying to get a sense from you, what you're hearing and when you think you might have a better sense of when that number might make it your way, hopefully.
I would hope by May. I have been pushing the state library to get that number to us, hopefully before that. But the challenge for them is to find an equitable way of distributing the money to libraries throughout the state. Some of the funding is based on school lunch programs, which, as you know, in Scarborough is a small percentage. So other communities will result in a larger amount of money, but every library is going to get something.
Mhm.
As is so often the case in Scarborough, we'll be on the lower end of the receipt, but we'll get something, and I'm using approximately $2,000. I would love to say it's going to be a lot more than that, but we just don't know
Mhm.
yet.
And just for everyone else, because I think I have the privilege of being on the library board, so I get updates on all of this stuff. But can you talk a little bit more about the study plans for this year, and how you're planning to allocate those funds and the timing, just so that everybody kind of knows how that's going to work out for the next year?
The fundraising and the building studies.
Yeah. Mhm.
Right now, we are, and we can talk about this more for your CIP, but I will give you a brief snapshot. The board right now has been engaged with the downtown committee to talk about the opportunity at Scarborough Downs. Possibility of moving a library to the Downs, the possibility of using the grandstand, the possibility of some other locations. So the fact that the library referendum was delayed an additional year gives us an opportunity to take advantage of all these conversations going on, which means that we're delayed a bit in our fundraising study. For us to have conversations with potential donors, we need to talk to them about where the library is going to be or where the expansion might be. So until we have finished those conversations with the downtown committee, our fundraising study is on delay. So we hope that that will be finished by the end of summer, I think is a safe way to phrase it. It involves personal conversations with potential donors, dozens of people. Following that, we'll actually have a number that we hope will be our fundraising goal, which then we can share with the community prior to requesting a bond through the referendum a year from now. So it's really important for us to get an accurate number of what that fundraising goal might be. There's nothing worse than finding a number that isn't accurate. And it can be really difficult for any kind of a building project, as you've all experienced, as we have here in Scarborough, what's going on with construction costs. We really want to be as accurate as possible to come in with a number that's accurate. And the town of Scarborough, frankly, hasn't had a large fundraising campaign that the whole community's been involved in. So we are also going to be sort of shaping the conversation as we go.
Thank you.
Betsy, go ahead.
Yeah, so I've been so first of all, I apologize for arriving late. So I probably missed something, but I'll ask that question in a minute. So I know you were on track, you were doing your study, and I mean, you have pretty much extensive work done about expansion at the current site. So how did this discussion about the Downs come up? And I apologize if I missed that in your presentation. And was that just something that, I mean, it kind of feels like it's delaying your progress, or did you feel obligated to do it? Do you feel it was worthy of delay, and maybe with so many other projects coming forward, so I'm just kind of trying to figure out that timing of, it seemed like you guys had done a lot of work already.
We had done a lot of work, and it was a little frustrating at first, but the reality is that this is the town's library. And if we have these questions later and we don't have the answers, it's not serving anybody's purpose well. So we love the word pivot now, don't we? We pivoted. We changed our attitude from this is a delay and frustrating to let's have a good conversation about this, because if it's a creative solution, we want to be sure we've addressed it and really embraced it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I would just add, I definitely highly encouraged it because I sit on the downtown committee, and we've talked a lot about, as we design the future downtown, we really need to think about anchor spaces that will really help draw the community. And I think through that conversation, the library could potentially be a great anchor space. So I'm glad Nancy and everybody have taken the time to do their due diligence now that we have that extra time to really better understand that opportunity and what it could do for the town and for the library. So I'm glad, Nancy, that you guys are kind of taking the time to pivot and explore that as an option.
Yeah, that's quite admirable.
We've also engaged our architect to actually do a more formal comparison of the opportunities that are in front of us right now. So we want to have that actually documented with some real hardcore numbers. So we've taken that step as well.
Okay, great. And I apologize for coming late and that I missed that, but it just was the full-time payroll increase of 20%. Is there additional staff in there, or what's driving the payroll increase this year?
I did mention that
Sorry.
that's fine. We did have a part-time position that was 32 hours that we made 40 hours
Okay,
in the previous fiscal year, but this is the first full year that it is reflected in the budget. And you will see that there's a deduction in
Right.
the part-time
Yeah.
line that is offset in the full-time line.
down in the part-time line.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank
Well,
you.
that was relatively painless. Thank you, Nancy. That was very helpful.
Thank you.
And thanks about the heads up about future years. That's hugely important to understand.
Yeah, you've got a lot of exciting stuff going on.
We do.
I'm curious about the work that you're doing at the Downs, or about the expansion and the makerspace. I think it's a great time to breathe some new life into the library. I think it's an important resource for our community, and I'm glad you're at the helm driving the ship. So
Thank you.
Next, we have SEDCO. Tom, if you want to introduce anything, or if, Karen, if you want to go ahead, please do.
Sure. So let me start with an overview of the budget and where we are. We're a small department. There's only 2 of us. Staffing, pay, and benefits really drive 84% of our total budget. This year, we are showing a 6.5% increase. And just to walk you through, so you know what those costs are, again, the staffing and benefits is pretty straightforward. We are follow the town. We're part of the town's payroll system, so we follow everything that the town does with regard to staffing and benefits. Our operating expenses, which I believe shows up as contract services in your line item budgets, but that really is our operating expenses. So that's our rent, our utilities, and actually those 2 categories make up about 43% of those operating expenses. The rest of that includes, hardware, software, supplies, training, travel, our MMA insurance, our audit, organizational dues. Everything is in that operating expenses for the year. We do have another line item that's marketing and communications. This is where we do separate out and have a line item for things like Constant Contact and some of the communication software, and that is shared. We share that with the town, so we make that available. The Constant Contact newsletter, that comes out of our marketing budget for the town. And that's also where we do things like occasionally we do advertising, sometimes locally. In previous years, we've certainly advertised in the New England business papers and things like that, just to sort of build an image for us. And together that makes up our entire budget. Next slide. I thought it might be good to go through how those have changed. Starting back in 2019, really that operating cost piece was $32,000 and change. In fiscal year 2020, we did cut back $5,000, $5,200 actually. And I think we did that toward the end of the year. There was really some budget curtailment and things like that. So we were able to not spend the $5,000, and our budget came in at $27,000 for fiscal year 2020. In 2021, it was reduced again. So those 2 reductions added up to somewhere around $8,700, $8,600. And so that really has dropped us down with respect to our operating costs. For the marketing and communications, Again, you see back in 2019, 13,500 has been that line item for several years going back. In fiscal year 2020, it dropped a little bit because we did it. There was a budget curtailment and we didn't spend some of those funds. So that was dropped down. And then for fiscal year 2021, it was dropped down again. So, in fiscal year 2022, we're basically putting back that $3,500 to take us back up to where we were in fiscal year 2019. I will say that for the fiscal year for the operating costs, we've restored a little over half of what we cut out of the budget, and hoping to restore perhaps in future years, additional cost saving. But right now we're only putting back about $4,900 of the $8,600 that we cut. And where that cut was not restored was really travel, training, some of those expenses that we still felt in 2022. We really weren't going to be spending that money, and we could really cut that back. If we could go to the next slide. So for new initiatives this year, we really want to restore our in-person annual meeting in the fall of 2021. That's really not a cost to the town because we have sponsorships and we charge admission, so that really is a wash for the most part. But again, it's an initiative to restore the in-person annual meeting. Now that the comp plan is almost ready and the council will be reviewing it soon, we have our own economic vision plan that the town accepted a long time ago. That plan really does follow the comprehensive plan. So once the comp plan is approved, we need to revise our economic vision plan. We also have in front of us the state's economic development plan, and we really do need to assess what our role is going to be in contributing to what the state is looking at doing for the next 10 years or so. And that should be part of this next year. We want to re-engage with our natural resource groups. We started to do some work with them prior to the pandemic, and we want to get back to that. Really, that's about recognizing that the natural resource groups play a role in the economic development with respect to the town, and we want to support and really foster that. And then we continue to want to develop our feedback system for the business community. I think we're pretty good at pushing information out, but getting folks to respond and tell us what's going on, that's a challenge, as we all know. It's a challenge with residents, it's a challenge with businesses, and we want to focus on that feedback system really for next year. And then the update of our website. Our website was done circa 2013. I think all the information is there, but it does need a refresh, and that's part of what we would want to do for new initiatives. And then for the next slide. So I was trying to think, how I could talk about opportunities to move forward to the budget goal. We are at 6.5%. To get down to 3%, we'd have to cut another $6,500 from the budget. And there's not a lot of places to do that. The biggest change in our operating budget, I think, that we did was we cut back and didn't do some hardware purchases. Our desktop here is 8 going on 9 years old, and it's at its capacity for memory and things like that. So, we anticipate needing to replace that next year. So it's not a lot of room in the operating budget. We probably could cut back again on, the marketing and communications. But I feel like as we go into this next year, this is just again, as Nancy said, using pivot all the time, but it's a pivotal year for us, both in terms of helping with town communication and economic development planning and marketing. It feels like it's going to be difficult to cut back on really doing that marketing piece and cutting back on some of the software that's associated with better communication. And I think we're always looking for different ways of doing that. And just as a reminder, we have both what we call our business to business website, which is the traditional SEDCO website, but we also run a Explore Scarborough website, which is really about restaurants and activities and where people can go. It's used for visitors and it's used for the residents as well. So the budget cut impacts really, again, we postponed some hardware replacement. We postponed some software purchases, and we really did postpone doing any design work updates on our website. We also certainly cut back on doing any type of image building and marketing in both Maine or in New England, which is one of the places we tend to try to build a Scarborough image with respect to New England. Oftentimes we do that jointly with some of the other communities. Next slide. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Karen. I didn't know that you ran a Explore Scarborough website, so this was informative or news to me. I have appreciated the Facebook shares that you do, and there's a lot of businesses that you've highlighted that I didn't know existed in Scarborough. So I thought that's been helpful and successful. I just had a couple of questions. With your new initiatives, that's really staff costs for a lot of that. So you have funding already included in your budget for that?
Correct. The only thing the budgeting does is if we've got the marketing funds, sometimes we tap that to do some graphic design work for us or things like that to support some of those efforts. But yes, the main part of those initiatives is really staff time.
And the other question I had was with your operating budget reductions over the past couple of years. I'm thinking of that's your rent, your utilities. So how did you manage that? Where did that come from? What got pinched?
What got pinched? The hardware and software. And our landlord has been extremely generous with us in terms of not raising our rent for a really long time. And he's been very understanding about that. So we were able to save there. But yeah, there's not a lot of places to do that. It either comes out of doing any updates to our websites. We didn't cut back on security because we had to keep up our security licenses. We just, for the record, we do all of our own in-house IT. We don't tap into the town's IT department. So that's all on us. And we do the best we can. We just postponed some purchases.
Thank you. John and Betsy?
Yeah, Karen, can you talk a little bit, because I think you said something really important that if you don't mind expanding upon a little bit, how things probably economically in town probably aren't quite where they're going to be or should be. I'm assuming pre-COVID. Can you talk about how the marketing and communications budget that you have is really going to help local businesses a little bit through the recovery?
Sure. Well, part of that is marketing communications and ensuring that the first priority for me is ensuring that I understand what businesses need and how they're going about doing their business. And I think that communication between understanding things that the town is doing that might affect business for the future, like outdoor services or emergency ordinances like that, getting that information out to them is part of that marketing and communications. And I think this year, more than any other year, having a connection to the businesses and providing a connection of businesses to businesses and businesses to our residents to keep people informed about what's really going on. We have at times done really advertising, again, branding of the town and making sure that people throughout the state and people in New England, the Boston area and things like that, understand that Scarborough has some great resources in terms of business location and options. So we do keep a small presence open like that. So that's part of it. But a lot of that is pushing information out, making sure we have information on our website that's important to businesses, making it easy to find if they're doing a marketing plan or anything like that.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Go ahead, Betsy.
Yeah, so does Sedco take in any revenue?
So the revenue that we take in is generally associated with the annual meeting. And we do direct sponsorships and, people pay to go to the meeting, although we subsidize a lot of folks going to the meeting. So that is our revenue source. Again, that's a wash with those annual meeting expenditures.
So when Sedco was founded, was there ever a thought that, there would be some revenue, like businesses would join and pay a membership fee for certain services? Was there, a thought to, I guess, apart from the beginning about, you guys do, I don't want to say unique work. I mean, a lot of towns have something similar to this, but maybe the way you do it is a little unique. If there's grant opportunities to bring in, to offset some expenses for this function.
Right. Well, a couple of things. I wasn't here when it was first started, but this is really Scarborough's approach to their economic development department. So most of the things that we do are part of what many towns do as part of their regular economic development staff. What Scarborough did originally was say, you know what, if we gave it just a little bit of separation, that could be useful for businesses. They may come in and share more information with us. They may work with the town earlier than perhaps they would have otherwise. So they felt like giving us that independent status really was a benefit to the town by promoting really a good relationship with the business community. But other than that, we really do function as most of the time as a department within the town, and we provide our services to everyone within the town, whether it's focusing on like the community calendar, which we try to do that promotes the residents, or focusing on the Exploring Scarborough, which is more of a residential, our resident benefit. But no, we really haven't tried to raise money outside of the traditional annual meeting. Doesn't mean that we don't look for grants on occasion or do that type of work and bring it in. We have had grants that supported really some economic development outreach, which we had a couple of years ago that we did through not the Maine Development Foundation, but the Maine International Trade Center. So that really provided, about $20,000 over the course of a few years to supplement marketing and other things. So we'll take advantage if it's possible, but we've not gone to trying to assign a business membership.
So since it does largely operate as a town department, because it's funded solely by the town, is there thought about being able to house so we're not paying rent? The Sedco office, I mean, I know now we have a a building that we're rehabbing down by the fire station at Dunstan. So lease, the lease may be up, but at this point we rent space. So just wondering if there's additional space, not that I want to make you guys move, but to me, you're pretty much a department of the town. I think the idea of it being separate is still probably worth exploring and maybe seeing if there is value that businesses think would be worth paying for to maintain and to as a membership to offset some of the cost. I think that's probably worth exploring. Probably not this year, maybe not even next year, but in the future. But largely, well, it is a 100% town expense. And so I just wonder if there's a way to offset some of your operating line by, using some town resources.
So Betsy, just on the location, let's see, since the time I've been here, I think we've moved 3 times. Yeah, so we're pretty nimble. We've moved a lot. And at one point we were back in town hall, and I think we kind of got booted out because they needed the space.
Right.
And some of our office space is offset by the Scarborough Community Chamber. They pay a small amount of those funds.
Right.
And I think that's the other thing that we have to be concerned about, or careful about, is ensuring that we've got some very strong business associations that are here, and we want to support them and make sure that people have access to all of those organizations to the best we can. But it's, we always have our eyes open.
Council, I think with the purchase of Alder Hall, there may be a possibility that we frankly haven't had previously. And admittedly, I've not had the time to really do a thorough analysis of how best to use that facility. I'm sheepish to admit that, but I haven't had the time to get to it at this point. But
Right.
there's something to explore.
There was a foundational work kind of to be done anyway before anything could happen. So.
Yeah, we need a roof repair as well.
Right.
Has anybody moved
Yeah,
into the
I
community
didn't
services
literally mean
space?
foundational. I kind of meant like, overall heat and, roof and that type of thing.
We do prefer a roof for us, but
Yes.
we're pretty flexible
A
other
lot
than
of
that.
We'll put your tent in the back.
John, we've moved 4 IT people up there.
Okay.
They were really sitting on top of each other.
I've seen
That
that.
was really fortuitous. In the COVID times, we were able to separate employees, and frankly, they needed space to begin with. So they've moved into that space. Haven't done anything to it, just moved their terminals.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other question that you touched on a little bit, but I was hoping you could elaborate on the relationship between SEDCO and the chamber.
Sure. So I sit on the board of the chamber, and my staff person sits on the board of Buy Local. So we try to have connections into both. We try to be really supportive of the chamber and Buy Local, and they often are our first partners when we're trying to do outreach to the business community. For example, when we do the vision update, the chamber has sat on a subcommittee with us and joined us in really talking about the future of Scarborough from an economic development perspective. And we certainly support and their marketing objectives when it makes sense for us. And we know that they provide some great opportunity, like through the concerts and other types of activities. And we try to pitch in and do as much as we can to support those activities.
My last
It's a rich
question,
resource for us.
thank you. It's probably more for Tom or Ruth, but as we have a downtown TIF district, right? And one of the we put a portion of the increased assessed value, or the funds that come in due to increased assessed value, into a fund, basically, that can be used for specific purposes. My understanding is one of those purposes could be to supplement or offset portions of your budget. Is what we're looking at, does it include any of that type of funds?
No, it's a straight just these are our expenses and this is the staffing. We do, just FYI to be clear, we do estimate every year a certain amount of funds that we raise, you know, and we subtract that off of our budget before we send that over. So in other words, every year we probably make a little bit on the annual meeting and we subtract that out. But other than that, we have not included any resources from the town.
I guess
Sure.
that's something that I'd be interested in learning more.
Yeah. Yeah, just quickly to answer your question, I believe there are 2 TIF districts that allow the use of the town funds, if you will, collected through the TIF, a percentage of them, to support economic development. One is the Highgate Parkway TIF, and I believe we've been using that to pay off debt on the sewer entirely. So to the extent that there's ever resources beyond the debt service requirements, we would certainly look to bring that in to offset these expenses. The newer one would be the downtown TIF, and that's still in its infancy. Ruth might be able to give you a ballpark number, but my recollection is we've collected less than 20,000 in that fund at this point. Ruth?
Yeah, we collected about 4,000 last year and about 19,000 this year. So it's just over 20,000. So not a lot of money at this
But I think
stage.
going forward, as that builds, that will accumulate. The other qualified purpose is traffic improvements, which we could spend all of that and then some. So we have to choose where we want to put that money. But I expect as soon as next year, you'll see us to start to bring in some money to offset these expenses.
It's helpful. Any other questions for Karen? Karen, you survived. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Next up is Public Works. And I believe we have Mike Shaw with us to
Yeah, we have Mike
go
and
over his
Steve.
budget.
Mike and Stephen Buckley, his deputy. Incidentally, is the format working for all of you? And we can do a check-in at the end of this.
I like it
Okay.
personally. Yeah.
Yeah, so far, so good.
Good. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well this afternoon. As Tom said, I'm joined with Deputy Director Steve Buckley, and we're here to give you a little, go through the slides and hopefully have some conversation after that about our operations and so forth and so on, answer any questions you might have. Basic overview of our budget here and where we're headed with it. As was the direction, we've spent a lot of time making sure that we're trying to restore our costs and return to those hopefully closer to the FY budget numbers, and that's staffing, operational considerations, and capital investments. And Steve will be filling in a little bit more on some of those shortly. Another takeaway of the of where we're at with the budget is that solid waste and recycling fee increases and increases in some contractual services that we needed to do. Those 2 bullets right there, the restorative costs and the solid waste, are the increase of 454,000 of the 510,000 that the overall budget expense increase is. Interesting piece about the solid waste. I have a special interest in that, and I actually chair the EcoMaine board. But one of the unintended consequences, or one of the consequences of COVID and people staying at home, and the reason for that, a lot of that increase that we're seeing of $158,000 is additional tonnage coming into the facility from the curbside. So people are not home. People are home an extra 8 or 10 hours a day during the work week, and they're creating more waste and recycling and that sort of thing. And that's bringing that number up. Waste and recycling and all those things that are part of that, hazardous waste and those sorts of things as well. That is only the overall cost of that is only eclipsed by the cost of actual operations of the number of divisions that we have in the public works. So it's a big piece of our budget, 1.56 million of it. So we try to keep a close eye on that and make sure that we're creating programs that work well and that sort of thing. So I guess with that, I'll move it over to Steve and restoration costs.
Thanks, Mike, and good evening, everyone. So yeah, as Mike already kind of introduced, some of our big increases in this next budget cycle are from restorations from cuts we made last year. So about 131,000 of that is staffing savings that we had from last year. So that includes the furlough from the summer. We had 2 positions within our operations division that we deferred hiring those positions until November. And then the third part of that is the deferred COLA, which was deferred until January of this year. Most of that is within the operations division for Public Works. So that's about 131,000 of that 454 that Mike mentioned on the previous slide. Then the next 2 items are capital initiatives. So under the equipment, these are items that we had originally put forward last year, but they were cut. So we've moved them forward to this year. And those include the Barber Beach rake, which is what we use to clean Pine Point Beach during the summer. Street sweeper, that's to replace one of our aging machines. We have 2. This is to replace the older one of those. And then the sidewalk machine attachment, that is for plowing of the sidewalks during winter. That's something we used to contract out. And unfortunately, it wasn't something we were able to do cost effectively anymore. So now we've done that, started doing that in-house. We currently have 1 machine. It isn't enough for the mileage of sidewalk that we have. So we're looking for a second machine to be able to pick up those the miles of sidewalk that we have. And then finally, we have another pickup truck that was delayed from last year. For the capital projects, Gorham Road Phase 3, which is a carry on from our last, well, not last year, the year before, construction that we had in front of the high school. The Phase 3 will be from Maple Ave down to the river, and we'll be doing some sidewalks and repaving in that area, and we'll be doing that after Unitil have done a pipe replacement this summer. So our work would actually happen next construction season. Then we also have the subsurface drainage. This is a 4-year study of all our underground drainage. We've already done years 1 to 3. This is just the final year to complete that project. Again, we didn't do that last year, so this is to finish that project out. Mitchell Hill Road preliminary design. Mitchell Hill, if anyone has been up there, is in some desperate need of some quite major work. The reason we pulled this out of our regular paving is because we have some realignment that we need to do and some widening in some sections. So it is going to need some full design, engineering design, and that's what this 135,000 is for this first year, and then we'd look to do the actual construction of that next year. And then finally, under the Route 1 adaptive traffic controls. So this is an adaptive traffic light system that we're looking to put in from basically from the main med hospital down to just before the marsh by Tractor Supply. So this is the same system that we have down at Dunstan, which we put in a few years ago, which has greatly increased traffic flow and cut down on the amount of stoppage time at the intersections in Dunstan. So we're hoping to expand that to the rest of Route 1 to really help traffic flow through there on Route 1. And then the final item we have, which is the other category. So this is restoration to our operational budget of 81,000. So these were non-staffing, non-salary savings that we found from last year as a result of COVID. So this is just a restoration. So this mainly includes our GIS and engineering lines, which fall under our budget. And the rest of it was split out over the various divisions within Public Works, and that includes things like training that we cut down on for last year, miscellaneous purchases, new equipment within the divisions, and then there's a few other items that we cut down on. With that, I'll hand it back over to Mike.
Thanks, Steve. So under new initiatives, really the upcoming year, FY22, is kind of a catch-up cleanup year. We've got a large number of work order requests that are carried forward from previous year. We always had a handful of them, but with COVID, we had a lot more that didn't get done. So we're very happy for the good weather that we've had early this year, because it's allowed us to get out ahead of it a little bit. But perhaps the one new initiative that we're working with is EcoMaine has been approached and is in the process of they're going to be putting a 5 megawatt solar installation on their capped landfill. So it's a brownfield, it's a neat project, and the town of Scarborough has an opportunity to be an off-taker of some of that energy and the credits that it will provide. And so we can expect about a $25 per megawatt hour savings, which is about $36,000 a year. And that'll be spread out amongst about 50 electricity accounts throughout the town. A lot of those, so the lion's share of it would be public works, would also be the street lights, traffic lights, and that sort of thing. That's going to be, we've not booked any savings this year based on the construction schedule and that sort of thing. But the work and the groundwork for that and for the savings the following year and for the next, it's actually a 20-year agreement, we'll be working on that this year. So that's why we've put that in as a new initiative. Something that we're really excited about. It's a fair savings, but also it really speaks to our desire to look at renewables and use land and space, because the Scarborough landfill, the EcoMaine landfill is in Scarborough. So the solar array will be in Scarborough, which is kind of a neat story as well. So that's kind of what we're doing with new initiatives this year. And next slide, please.
Incidentally, Mike and I have been working on a power purchase agreement with, what's the name of the company?
EDF.
EDF Renewables. So that's a legal document that will come before council in the next couple of months. So this is a good primer for at least the three of you. Go ahead, Mike, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you, Tom. I appreciate you clarifying that. So obviously opportunities to move forward towards budget goal. There aren't a whole lot of funding mechanisms, grants, and so forth for the core work of what Public Works does. A lot of the grants that we see come through, actually, although they may be good initiatives, they actually end up becoming something additional to our core and, in a sense, end up costing money. That being said, we continue one of the best programs we've been involved in over a number of years is the DOT Municipal Partnership program that the Maine DOT has to offset project expenses. To date, we've received $3 million in those funds for projects such as Pleasant Hill Road, first phase, Gorham Road, Cummings Road project, those, and we actually have earmarked right now at our we also have earmarked $700,000 for what we're calling phase 3, which you'll see on the capital projects for that third phase of Gorham Road, which is from Maple Avenue down to the river, as Steve mentioned. Again, Public Works, our schedule of fees, we reviewed the schedule of fees, and there's really the only thing that we can identify, and it's not a huge money maker, but our schedule of fees, there's a significant disparity in our costs that we charge for both cemetery plots and burial fees. We've done some comparison with other municipal cemeteries, and you know, we're probably, given the fact that we do 10 cremations and 5 burials a year, there's probably an $8,000 or $10,000 increase in revenue that we're leaving on the table based on what we're seeing for additional fees. And I could go into that at a later date if it's something that you folks are interested in exploring a little bit. And then the other thing, some of you are aware that we have a service right now, because we do have such quality technicians and that sort of thing. We have agreements with Old Orchard, Wells, Kennebunk, and a couple of other towns to take care of some of their fire apparatus, more specifically their pump systems and the technical pieces of the truck. The chassis work is done by other people, but so we generate revenue that way, and there's always an opportunity to expand that service. And and I think that may be an opportunity that we can take a look at. I hesitate a little bit right now to be too aggressive with that. With COVID last year, we don't really know what the more normal schedule of these towns is going to be, and we want to see what the workload's going to look like before we jump into any more, and at the expense of making sure that our own departmental equipment is well taken care of. So that's kind of what we have for budget opportunities right now.
So on the impacts of the budget cuts from last year, we really tried to minimize any effect on residents that we could, both from COVID and from those reductions. We did though find that we had from last year over into this construction season, we had around 140 work orders that we were not able to complete. That were these are service requests from residents that came in before this past winter that we weren't able to get to, and we have those, and we're trying to work through those this spring. Obviously, we're a very seasonal dependent department, so depending on what the season is, it dictates what we have to do. Right now, where sweeping is traditionally our spring activity, which we are doing right now. So we're trying to clear this backlog in conjunction with doing our normal work that we need to do. The 139, that is more than we would expect. Typically the work that we don't get to is our own things that we've highlighted that need doing. But that they don't necessarily need doing when that work was made. But these were specifically from residents that we do try and clear before going.
Stephen, I wonder if you or Mike could just elaborate very briefly on your sweeping operation. I think there may be some that think, oh, it's just a single person in a vehicle in a sweeper. I guess two things. One, talk about the duration to go kind of town-wide, and two, what the crew looks like for that sustained period.
Sure, Tom. So we there's two things that we do in the spring that always happens right off quick. One is just the nature of the use of the areas. We try to get in and out of the beach areas as soon as possible. So Higgins Beach area, Pine Point, those we'll go in there, and primarily we do that with that's the first spots where we go to with our what we call full crew sweeping. And so full crew sweeping is really the two sweepers that we do have, hand crews on the ground, and then obviously traffic control is a big consideration. The islands get swept, the sidewalks get swept. It's a full cleaning. We actually go out and do litter patrol and that sort of thing. After that piece, that core work is done, which we are actually done. We just finished up this week. So now what we do is we move out into the various neighborhoods. We try and pick a different location to start. We don't want everybody being, we don't want the same place being first, same place being last year after year. We try to mix it up a little bit. We're trying something new this year, actually, because we have a mechanical sweeper and we have a vacuum sweeper. The vacuum sweeper works really well as far as maintenance, sweeping, final cleanup. Those two machines are going to run in tandem this year. So there'll be, in your neighborhood, you'll see one sweeper, you'll see another one right behind it. And so we're gonna attempt to do it that way. We think we can see some efficiencies that way with less passes from one sweeper. So we're going to hope to do that. The rate we're going, if we have a minimal amount of breakdowns, which they're very maintenance intensive. A sweeper is an interesting thing. You go out and spend $300,000 for it, and it's got grease and bearings, and you put it in dirt and expect it to last a long time. They just start tearing themselves apart from day one. But we're hoping this year to be the end of June to be done sweeping, and that's kind of our goal this year. But it's very labor intensive, especially the full crew sweeping. The machines are very maintenance intensive. Broom sets last maybe 100 hours if we're lucky, and those sorts of things. And so you'll see the sweeper, and depending on the unit, a truck following, so that they can dump directly in there and we can haul and spend less time on the road with the sweepers.
Thank you for that diversion. It's just a kind of a relatable topic, and I think a good example of just appreciating a town of this size and with the road and infrastructure network we have. It's not a simple endeavor, for certain.
Mike, what do you do with the dirt?
Well, John, we do a number of different things with it. We'll do things like if we have loam that has too much clay to it or something like that, we'll blend the material in. We use it for dump cover, those sorts of things. If we have areas that we're working where we have a deep fill on a project or something, we'll use it there. We try to reuse those sorts of things, just like our tree operation, the chipping that we do, we'll make erosion material out of that for roadside ditching projects and so forth and so on. So we try to be creative with the products that we end up having.
On this slide, what's an example of a resident requested work order? A couple of examples.
Go ahead, Steve, please.
Sure. Yeah, so that would be anything that we get calls on. So that could be, an issue with a drainage ditch outside someone's house, a tree that needs trimming for a site restriction, signs that they get knocked down and things like that. Anything that we get called on, that these are ones that people have contacted us to us for us to come out and look at them or fix them.
Is this your largest backlog you've ever had, or?
Yeah, I don't have metrics from previous years, but yeah, this is more than we would normally see. Quite a bit more than we would normally see.
Councillor, please appreciate, anything that is kind of emergency nature is attended to and
Right.
has been right along.
Correct.
These are things that can wait.
Right, yeah, it just shows the impact of the cuts. And was this a low salt dirt year, low snow year, or was this about average, or?
It was probably, average is changing. Our winters are fairly inconsistent. The trend is towards more salt as we have more snowstorms that are around the freezing mark, or slightly above. Those are the ones that drive salt usage and sand usage. We didn't have a particularly high snowfall year this past winter, but we still managed to use a good amount of salt and sand compared to our historical averages.
Like that dangerous ice right in that range, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
So just a couple more things on this slide that I'll highlight. So the other the other area that was impact was our vehicle maintenance, external municipality work that we do, because we had crews furloughed within our vehicle maintenance division. We did generate a backlog within our Scarborough departments. And part of the agreement we have with the municipalities is that we prioritize our work. So if ever we do get into a situation where we need to catch up, we'll prioritize Scarborough vehicles ahead of the external municipalities. Obviously that impacts our revenue because we're not bringing in the revenue from that work. We have tried to catch up with some of that, but there's just some of that work that's going to end up being deferred over to next budget cycle. We had a slower response time with our many staff in the building at all times. We tried to keep things to a reasonable timeline, but things like getting back and doing our street building permits where we have to have someone go out and inspect it before approving it, those were slower. We did move all our forms, street opening permits being one of them. We did move all of those online, so that eliminated the need for most people to come into Public Works. So that was something that the IT department helped us do, and this has been really helpful. Again, going out and looking at work orders and actually getting them completed, we were slower than we would have liked, and we're trying to get back, as I already said, to clear that backlog that we have from last year. And the final thing that's being impacted is the preventative and opportunity maintenance that we do. So this isn't things that we residents call in about. These are the things that we know we need to do. They reduce maintenance costs in the long run. So these are things like tree trimming, ditch work. It's all the preventative maintenance that we would normally do that we weren't able to get to this year. And I think that's all we had for the slide. So if there's any questions, feel free to ask.
Go. Thanks, guys. That was great. I just have two questions. My first one is around the sidewalk snow removal. I think you guys had in there. Does that allow you guys to cover more area, or is that strictly to replace, an existing piece of equipment? Because I know we've received some emails during the winter time from people who were concerned about the coverage of what you guys are able to cover, knowing that there's limitations. So does this allow you guys to cover more space, or is it to replace an existing piece of equipment?
So the existing, the piece that we have now, the existing piece that we have now, we were able to source that. That was a used machine. To go back a little bit, when we realized we had to transition to in-house sidewalk plowing, we had put out a bid that fall, realized that it was going to come back way over budget, and was at the point where it just didn't make sense to continue to do it that way. So the stopgap was to buy the existing machine that we have now, which was a used machine returned from a municipality and had some rebuilds done to it and that sort of thing. The reality of it is it's a good backup machine. And, we have had some maintenance problems with it. Because we have good mechanics and we have good operators, we'll be able to make it work. This new machine would allow us to do what we're doing more efficiently. And I think this would be, we would be doing what we're doing right now. And I think that there is going to have to be, beyond that, a larger conversation as to what, it's more of a policy piece as to what we want to do for sidewalks, how many we want to do. We've identified 3 tiers of sidewalks in terms of importance and so forth. We're trying to do the campus area at Oak Hill, and then at Dunstan, and that's primarily what we're doing right now. I will tell you that sidewalk machines are right up there with sweepers as far as maintenance and breakdowns. They're one of those things that if you have 2, you get a pretty good chance of having one operating while the other one's being worked on, and that's just, it's the nature of them. They just it's a tough thing for them to do. So that's right now. The goal would be to be able to be more responsive to the route that we have, get it done sooner, and that sort of thing. And with that, maybe have the opportunity to take a look and say, what are those areas out there, and it becomes, at that point, it becomes more of a policy decision as to what we want to see in terms of sidewalks and stuff.
Yeah, John, I just wanted to elaborate. For comparison, I believe the city of South Portland has 6 sidewalk machines. Now, they've obviously have a different level of policy and priority. They're also a more urban and built environment, so there's some efficiencies. A lot of the complaints that we've received historically are in areas or in neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods, and we frankly need to be really clear that it's not likely, given our spread out geography, that we're going to be able to ever provide that level of service. But our built environment, particularly in the growth areas, I think is an area that will get increasing demand for and need to attend to.
It's also, if I may, Tom, it's my understanding that South Portland, for instance, is an example of a community that there are a bunch of students that walk to school. They're actually not on a school bus route, and that everybody in Scarborough, my understanding, with the exception of down by the hillside neighborhood off of Pine Point Road, everybody has a bus route that they're assigned to, and so the transportation for school back and forth, and that's why sometimes, even though the weather looks nice and is nice outside, you'll see South Portland cancel school because they didn't get the sidewalks done in time, and that's
Just the last point. You know, historically we've tried to do this with existing crews, and the fact is the crews with any storm of significance are out for 10, 12, 15, 24 hours sometimes. They need a rest, and so the sidewalks sit until someone can get a rest and come back in. So the only way to do it effectively is actually have crews that are able to do it kind of in concert with the plowing activities. So it ends up being quite expensive, and you'd love to have part-time employees, but it's exceedingly difficult to find people that are willing to work on those terms in those conditions. So it's a challenge and only going to get greater, frankly.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Thanks. My other question, and I think it's a clarifying question because I read the responses that you guys provided to the questions we had given to you guys earlier, which I appreciate. So I read it as if you guys are asking for 2 additional FTE in the operations group. So can you just clarify, is it 2 additional FTE that were not provided last year that you're asking for again this year, or is it different? I just want to make sure I understand. Are there new FTE requests, or is it what you guys mentioned about you know, the impacts of people brought on board this year that you're seeing the full impact this year or next year?
Yeah, Councilor, I can understand, I can feel that one. So there were 2 maintenance worker 1 positions, which are the operations side. These are our plow truck drivers that were vacant last spring. And so part of the FY21 decision was to hold off on filling those positions until November 1st of 2020. So it would allow us to bring those staff on when they're really most essential in the winter operation season. So this is, so those positions have been hired. They're current employees. We absolutely need them year round. It was just an opportunity to sort of soften the blow in FY21.
Okay.
I'll just add one more thing, that there is also a restoration of essentially a half FTE, which is related to we have 1 shared position currently in the budget. It's a model that is shared between community services in the summer and public works in the winter. So we did eliminate 1 of those 2 positions last year. We are proposing to bring that back on a full-time basis in this budget.
Where is that reflected? Is that in the proposed position or the part-time pay or the staff full-time pay? Where's that?
Let me pull that. Let me find that for you, Councilor Gleistein. Hold on 1 moment.
I believe it's the 33,197 in the proposed position.
Okay.
It's representing half of that shared position.
Okay.
Tom's exactly right. Yeah.
And then the part-time, you know, it looks like, you know, it's steadily gone up 1936 and then 44 in 2020, 2021, you know, clearly we had some savings there for the COVID, and now it's up to 60. So I was just, so was that something you were describing, Leanne? Some type of restoration, or are we adding part-time employees, or?
I think, Mike, you may be able to speak to that. I expect that part of the answer, Councilor Gleistein, is to staff, you know, we have in the past had part-time staff plow routes, smaller plow routes, and we've also had part-time staff the sidewalk plow. And so, again, as we brought the sidewalk plow in-house, or really by necessity, a contractor we worked with got out of the business, we've had to increase those part-time lines. Is that accurate, Mike?
It is. You know, we have a situation where we need to do that. You know, we find that more and more, we find ourselves bringing in part-time folks to cover plow runs for folks that are full-time employees. If you're a full-time employee and you're sick, or you've got something else that's going on, we need to make sure that we have coverage for those folks, because if they're not available, the snow doesn't stop falling and that sort of thing. So it's just a function of trying to keep those seats full. I mean, our part-time and overtime lines are the lion's share of it. 90+% of it are spent during winter months.
And you have success finding people? Like, what is there a definition, Liam, of part-time, that somebody can't work more than X hours, or?
So we do have a definition in the ordinance that speaks to what's a part-time, what's a full-time employee, and generally the line is less than 30 hours a week year-round is defined as part-time. We have very few permanent part-time positions in town. The people who we've been fortunate enough to hire on a part-time basis or an on-call basis oftentimes are former employees who have essentially retired.
Oh, okay.
So we bring them back on an on-call basis. But we've been very close to the line in the last 2 years with finding these people who are, again, retirement age, who are willing to come in and pick up a plow that otherwise is going to go vacant or help out in some other way. So that's where our success has been for the most part.
For many years, the construction industry was seasonal, and so folks would get laid off in the winter time, and we always had a stock of people to choose from, Councilor Gleistein, and it's just not there anymore. And
Right.
so it becomes very, very worrisome for us in the fall as we get into that time to make sure that we're going to have everything staffed up, and the additional folks lined up that we may need. So.
Yeah, that's a really interesting dynamic of change for people to understand, like, the impact of that. That's very, very interesting.
And we've tried to recognize the trends. For instance, one of the plow routes that we have, we went to a lighter duty truck, I'll call it, and it does not require a commercial license to operate. Which is good, because it opens up our field of available candidates that we can put in there if we needed to. But it's certainly not as efficient, or it doesn't move as much snow as a larger truck will. But it fits the need, and it's just part of what we're having to do as far as figuring out different ways to operate during the winter.
I would just offer an observation. If any of you have had the occasion to be traveling around the region during a snow event of any sort, I suspect you'll notice that Scarborough roads are better than most, and that's due obviously entirely to Mike's attention. But this is, no good deed goes unpunished. So our residents have become accustomed to a level of service that we've offered. We can certainly change that level of service, but I think that will be met with some challenges. So we're a victim of our own success in some respects in that regard.
Interesting sidebar, if you're ever wondering, typical snowstorm, the trucks will average about 350 miles in a typical storm. On plow runs that are 15 to 20 miles long.
And that's about 25 miles in reverse on top of that.
John, you had your hand up?
Yeah, I lied. I have 2 more questions. Is now the time to talk about some of the capital improvement stuff? I know we have a separate meeting, but you guys kind of brought them up, and so I figured it's okay to ask a couple questions there.
If you have questions, I think it's appropriate. Yeah, I have some myself. So.
Okay, good. I think one of my questions, and perhaps you can, maybe Tom, you might be able to ask this better than what I might be asking. But at our transportation committee, Angela shared a couple of projects that I think were put forward. I want to say 5 of them. And I think some of those projects might be capital improvement projects listed in here that get either some sort of federal or on a list to hopefully get some federal or state support. Can you map those out for me based on what's in your capital improvement budget, what was put forward, and when will we know? Again, I'm sure there's a lot of uncertainty, but when will we know whether or not our projects make the cut and what that impact might be?
It's my understanding that GPCOG, all the communities put in at least 5. So there's close to 110 projects that are being under consideration. Last I talked to Angela, I think it was sometime in June or something like that, that they'd be going through the process. They're going through the process of winnowing that number down. And so, it's going to be late into the budget season, I would think, Tom, wouldn't you?
Yeah, so John, this, we're not contemplating any of the rescue plan monies. Based on what we know, and maybe there's some good news that will come in the next couple of weeks, that we're going to be able to qualify any of our projects for those funds. This program was really federal funds being administered through our regional partner, TPCOG. There's also this huge infrastructure bill being discussed in Washington. I don't know when that's going to shake loose, if at all, but there may be potential there as well.
Great.
To that end, though, you might find it of interest that the Gorham Road project in here that's budgeted at $2.3 million. That's full cost. That does not contemplate the $700,000 offset for that project. We need to show the full cost of it in the budget.
Okay. And then the Route 1 adaptive lights that you guys are putting in, I heard great things about the Dunstan Corner ones. Can you talk a little bit about what improvements you anticipate that's going to have to traffic? Because I know that's a complaint we often hear about, is the concerns with traffic. And I think this is going to be a great solution to kind of address some of that. So can you guys talk a little bit about that?
I'll actually let Steve talk about it. Steve was kind of shepherded that project from the beginning, the Dunstan project, and he's been working with Rhythm Engineering on this one as well.
So the Dunstan one is that we did that a few years ago, and that's always been a challenging intersection. The signals are very close together. The time of day, traffic, although a big part of it is driven by commuter traffic. It's also very weather dependent, especially during the summer, with beach traffic and things like that. So when we installed that, the way the system works is unlike a traditional traffic light setup, where everything's based on time of day. So it's a set schedule that's already in the system. The way the adaptive works is has detection on each of those intersections, and that picks up and the number of vehicles that are approaching from each direction, and it can adjust the amount of green time that each approach has based on the volume of traffic. So, for example, in morning commute, most of the traffic is heading northbound on Route 1, and then you also have additional traffic coming in from the broad turn onto Route 1. So it'll adjust those two approaches based on the level of traffic. Overall, we've seen around a 15 to 30% reduction in the amount of queuing at those intersections, and also the amount of time that people arrive on red. That's really one of the big metrics that people use when they're looking at efficiency through a corridor. Is how many of those lights are you going to be stopping at? Ideally, you want to get a platoon of cars going through, and you'll get your first green light, and you'll carry on through the entire corridor without hitting any red lights, and that really helps to drive the efficiency of that corridor, and cut down on the amount of times that you sat at a light idling. So it cuts down on gas mileage and things like that.
The key is that you need to stay the speed limit for you to hit that next green light.
Correct. Yes. If you try and speed up between ones, then you will end up stopping at every single one.
So I'm going to put my data geek hat on for a minute, because this is really exciting stuff for me. One of the things that I've really struggled to get my arms around is real data on traffic, right? There's some DOT data points that you can look at, but they're small scale studies, limited time. Are we counting how many cars go through the Dunstan Corner now, and maybe what the throughput is, or something that we might be, after we have a year or two under our belts, be able to look back, is traffic improving or not?
Yes, that is one of the great things that the system brings. So we do have counts for all of those approaches down at Dunstan, and that'll be the same for when we get into installing it on the rest of Route 1. We'll have every single vehicle that goes through there will be counted.
That's exciting.
One of the differences in Dunstan, probably 5 or 6 years ago, we did significant infrastructure improvements. We severed Payne Road where it comes into Route 1 and rerouted it around the old Dunstan Schoolhouse. And then these efficiencies came in at a later date. I think the two things together has vastly improved the situation. The problem with this stretch of Route 1 is that we don't have the ability to make significant, if any, physical infrastructure improvements. We don't have additional right of way. We're not adding additional lanes, so forth. So this is really about squeezing out the max and maximizing efficiency within the paved surface in large part.
I have more questions on this because I think this is just interesting. So what is the like, do we have a longer term plan for this in terms of other major intersections? Like, I'm just thinking as the Downs gets more developed and there's more traffic and people going there, especially coming down Gorham Road. Like, I'm always afraid to turn left on Mussey onto Gorham Road going that way because the traffic is just always coming. So are there other, like, what's the long-term plan? Are there other, like, what's after this area? Is there another area, or is there a plan in place where we're kind of thinking long-term how we're going to address this with this cool solution?
We've identified the Payne Road corridor, the Route 1 corridor, and the North Scarborough area up near Saco Street as prime candidates for this adaptive traffic control, because it is truly it's what we need to be doing, because it's a relative bargain compared to adding lanes, and nobody wants more pavement than we need. I think the important thing is that we maximize what's out there right now as far as existing pavement, and to do that, this product is the way to go. And so it's this CIP right here that's before you for is something that's going to do the intersections from Municipal Drive out to the main med, and that's $346,000 is. It's a variable bargain compared to trying to build your way out of it or something like that.
Yeah. The other thing to note is how quick we can make this happen. This is essentially hardware that is mounted up on the existing systems, and then there's a lot of back end work, but there's no physical construction to speak of. So quite honestly, if we get this approved in this budget cycle, I expect you'll see those improvements in place by the fall, or this construction season, which is remarkable. Usually you're 2 or 3 years out. The other thing worth noting is that this is funded entirely by impact fees that we've collected. So this is not tax dollars.
Great.
That's phenomenal. Did you have another question, John?
Oh, no, not right now. Maybe.
Okay, I actually have quite a few. I'd like to start by saying you run a lean ship. Looking at your numbers more so than I think any other department or aggregate department. In 2019, you spent $7 million, and what you have before us right now is 7.4 roughly. That's a 5.5% increase over 3 years. I think you're finding ways to be more efficient. It's a good example, I think, for us to learn from. And you're providing a lot of services for other towns. And that's really one of my questions is, do we make money on that, or is it revenue or cost neutral? Is there opportunity there to make it up? Well, I guess I want to learn more about it.
We generate about 125 to 130,000 in revenue.
Okay.
And that's certainly more than pays for the technician that takes care of that. We're very reasonable with our rates, so it's a benefit to that community. We have a small markup to handle the parts and the record keeping and that sort of thing that we provide for those communities. It's a really neat model, I think, and it's worked out really well for us. And that person is not, and as an added bonus, that person's not busy all the time with those outside services, which actually is very helpful for us certain times of year when we're right in the crisis of winter operations, or trying to get cruisers set up, new cruisers set up to go out on the road and that sort of thing. That person can go over and give a hand with that. So it's worked out really well for us.
Yeah, this is not a charity to other communities.
No.
The system is built with a reasonable margin. So we're confident that we're covering our costs and making some money. There is a point where we need to add more staff, and so I think there's a point where we can get it grow too big, and we lose that sweet spot. I don't know where that is, but that's a cautionary note, I think.
And then it looks like you provide a lot of services to other departments, whether it's vehicle maintenance or fuel. Am I seeing the same numbers on two different budgets? Like, am I seeing the fuel costs on your budget and then the fee for services on whether it's the fire or police department or school department budget?
So the intergovernmental revenues are what you're seeing. Those are those. So the department's fire department budgets for X amount of dollars of they're going to spend X amount of dollars on fuel, X amount of dollars on labor and vehicle maintenance service. So we do internal record keeping and billing of them, so that it's you see the offset in their budget and our budget. The intergovernmental revenues is more a record keeping piece than anything, but we're keeping track of that.
Okay. The other question I had related to your capital improvement projects. I understand the adaptive signals are going to be targeted to be funded through reserves, which is great. I noticed a lot of the studies, it looks like we're earmarking taxpayer money to fund those. And I guess my question for probably Ruth and Tom, or maybe you guys, is if there's a likelihood that we're going to undertake the projects that are associated with these studies in the next 3 years, is there opportunity there to shift from appropriations to bonding for some of them?
Yeah, I'll start and Ruth can finish. This is a fairly recent tightening of SEC regulations, or IRS, federal at any rate. There is the potential to cover these kind of soft costs, I'll call them, the engineering and survey work required for a road construction project, for instance. If in fact the project comes to fruition. So essentially what you need to do is to find a way to fund it with local funds, and you can reimburse yourself back when the project actually materializes and becomes a capital asset. So presumably through bonding, we would include those funds already invested, so to speak, in getting the project ready and reimburse ourselves. But we need, the short-term dilemma is we need to find a way to fund the initial soft work.
You actually have to pay for it.
And you and I have kicked around some ideas of maybe coming up with using fund balance or other reserve accounts with a very clear understanding that they are to be reimbursed at the time we go to bond for the actual capital project.
Yeah, I'm just looking, some of these probably look like there's going to get support from either GPCOG initiatives or federal or DOT, where, there's a good likelihood they might take place if we do the study and have it shovel ready, that they could take place. That having been said, we're fronting a lot more of our SIP than we typically do. So I'm trying to understand if there's opportunities there to allow some of these opportunities to happen without hitting the taxpayer for them right now.
I need to have a conversation with bond counsel. Frankly, bond counsel won't let us bond certain projects because of these new rules.
Yeah.
So we just need to respect that and find a way to work with the new regulations. I think there may be a creative solution we can explore here.
Perfect. Salt and sand. Do we purchase it in bulk for the year? Do we have a purchasing agreement? How's that work?
Salt, we purchase through GPCOG. GPCOG goes out on a cooperative bid, and consistently are very, very, very good as far as the pricing goes. $54 a ton delivered, which is and like the DOT, for instance, also offers an opportunity to tie on with them. But frankly, the GPCOG bid is always better. And then winter sand. The winter sand piece is not as big an expense, but there's a certain grade. So winter sand is not sand. You're looking for a sharper sand with some bite to it. I actually have a winter sand spec that I require someone to meet, and so that is a little bit more. We do that on our own, and we look around to a couple of different vendors, but they also have to be able to, like I said, provide a product that meets the specification, and it's not as easy as that may seem either.
And I think to my last question, so it wasn't all that bad. Can you elaborate on the Mitchell Hill Road project?
Yeah, Mitchell Hill is that road that was a little used road up until probably about 15 years ago. And now between the building in Scarborough and the people coming in from other towns to go to work here and trying to get around different ways, it's gotten a lot of use. And it's a road that has really bad vertical alignment. It's got some really weird hills to it. We'll never take care of Mitchell Hill itself. But between Mitchell Hill, the top of Mitchell Hill, and Holmes Road, there is some vertical alignment, some things that we would like to adjust. There's drainage issues in there that we have currently, and on top of that, it's a narrow road, and it's a 40-foot right of way. So there's all kinds of challenges there, and there's a lot of ledge and rock. So it's not just a simple. It's a rural road, so you would think, well, why not just reclaim it, grind it, pave it, and do that sort of thing. But that road gets so much use, and it has become is something that we just really need to make into a built, designed road so that it'll be able to handle the traffic for the future. It's not gonna get less traffic. It's only gonna get more.
And that's a town road. There's no state participation there. Okay.
It's one of the few north-south, roughly speaking, roads in town. And so it's a commuter road in many respects. And frankly, I encourage you to take a drive on it. It is a old country road that was probably a cow path, a wagon path originally, with limited, if any, base and no drainage. So it's a challenge. I encourage you all to take a drive.
I used to frequently drive through there, but it's been a couple of years, honestly. So I'm gonna do that. Are there any other questions from the counselors, John or Betsy or Ruth?
I just wanted to mention that the excise revenues that we collect, I selfishly take a portion of that to fund that office, but pretty much the rest of it is supposed to go towards road maintenance. So that helps to fund a good chunk of the Public Works Department.
So that's 6 million a year, somewhere around that, right? Okay. So you're now self-funded. I didn't know that. Okay. Well, thank you guys. That was very informative and helpful. Does anybody need a break before we go to community services? Or are we ready to jump right in?
5-minute break or?
Why don't we break for 7 minutes and say we'll get back at 10 minutes of 6? Okay.
Sounds good.
Right.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for your time, folks.
Thank you.
Don, what's your plan for conclusion of this meeting? Just knowing that many of us have to get on to council at 7.
I'm hoping for 6:30.
Okay.
I suspect we'll be able to come close to that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be great. That's just enough time. Thank you.
Cool. I can't even catch up on emails with a 7-minute break, Tom.
No, I know.
We'll give another few minutes for John to get back.
John, unlike the other ones earlier tonight, I'd like to make a couple of opening comments with this
Right.
one. Good.
Okay. And we are all back. So I'll call this meeting back to order. It's 5:50. And next up, we have community services, and the town manager is going to give an introduction to that department head.
Yeah, I guess I just want to give Scott and his team a shout out. Community services from its beginning and up until right now is kind of the little engine that could. This department kind of picks up all the leftovers. When something doesn't fit somewhere else, it ends up with community services. And as I reflect back on our experiences this past year, I mean, all of my staff have been incredibly resilient, but none more than community services. They continue to be flexible and nimble and kind of respond to what the needs are. And I just think it's laudable and worth noting. And that's no disrespect to anyone else, but I think they went over and above. Not a single person on his staff has been doing their job, normal job this past year. They've all pitched in other ways to make it all work. I guess the other point I just want to clarify, one of the previous meetings, I think we're looking at page 148. It's a summary sheet that just simply shows the totals for, aggregate totals for each department. And I just want to point out there's, the number that's shown there is certainly accurate. That table is comparing the current FY21 budget to the proposed FY22 budget. And it shows, an over 35% increase. And that's, jaw dropping. I guess just to put it in perspective, one, I think for obvious reasons, FY21 is not a good comparative year. And if you look back at FY20, that's not necessarily a good year either. I instituted a spending curtailment in November that year, and community services, because they are who they are, really went over and above and tightened their belt significantly. So the actual is far less than budget. So just simply comparing FY20 budget to FY22 budget request is a 10.3% increase. So I just wanted to kind of frame that just because the last couple of years have been really unique for different reasons. And community services has kind of suffered the brunt of a lot of those changing details. So I just think hopefully that helps paint a little better picture of the request. And I think Todd's going to use his time to help further explain how community services is kind of different than other departments in town because of what they do and how they're funded. Go ahead, Todd.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it. And Liam's getting our slide presentation up. So thanks for your efforts and your time this evening. As Tom mentioned, my initial opening remarks are around kind of a more comprehensive overview of our department, because I hear time and time again, well, community service is complicated. It's hard to understand. And so I was trying to simplify it in a couple of ways. So when we make decisions, how we make them and where they come. And so this is a general overview of that spreadsheet that Tom just mentioned, and really highlighting and showcasing our department where our budget request is just over 2.8 million and our projected revenue is 2.3. So our net ask to the town as of right today to a taxpayer is $507,000. That's 82% cost recovery. National average is around 25, 26%. I mean, I consider Scarborough Community Services, and this is work that Bruce laid way before I did, and I'm continuing it. We're a unicorn in the state. We do so much with so little, and we're really not asking for a lot. When we do, it's necessary, and I'll touch base on kind of that community good. So proud of where we are, regardless of sometimes how the numbers turn out at the end. So Liam, if we could move to that next slide for me, please. So just to kind of educate everybody, this is kind of a cost recovery model that we talk about within our department, where some things are highly subsidized and have low cost recovery, and some things are low subsidy and high cost recovery. And so on this bottom, it really talks about the community benefit of it, where if something's low subsidy, it's really individualized. It's self-interest, limited impact, exclusive. Not everybody can gain access to it. And then you slide across to the right to the community good. Those are community-wide interests. They're essential services. They're far-reaching impacts, access for all, parks, those type of things. And so this is kind of how, when we talk about how we're going to meet our goals, we kind of give this into consideration. And so, Liam, if you'll move to that next slide for me, please. It's really about sustainability and how we use our subsidy. And again, super proud of this, where using this kind of individualized community benefit on the left all the way to the right, community good. The programs on the far left ask for zero subsidy from the taxpayer. All those programs are self-funded to break even or turn a profit. And you continue across to the right, and even including this new hub, and that percentage is going to go down when I make some of my alterations. But hub is asking presently 40 to 50% subsidy. Senior programs are subsidized between 80 and 90% subsidy. And then our Parks and Ground Department is 90 to 100% subsidy based. And so we'll talk about a little more in the next slide, but I really want to show is kind of how we look at things, all the things in the shading area, and including our hub projection, because that's kind of where we live and the operations come out of it. Our total net profits cover subsidy required. We theoretically, there could be no ask from the taxpayer in these areas if we're meeting our expectations and are meeting our spending benchmarks. So I just really want to paint that picture for you as we move into the next slide.
And Todd, when you say subsidy, you're meaning taxpayer support.
Yes, sir. Yep. Thanks for that clarification. And so really community services is made up of 5 divisions, with the hub being the proposed 6th division. The sum of all divisions in the total net ask to the taxpayer is $507,000, just over. Those are stranded costs. Those are decisions we've made to not charge Little League, soccer groups, market rate to help offset running those youth programs. Those are stranded costs. We don't recover costs for maintaining and mowing and weed whacking all the school facilities, prepping any ball game for the school, lights, utilities, water. Those are stranded costs, and those are decisions councils before you and school board have made collaboratively, and that's for another conversation. But that's all covered in that stranded cost. The Parks and Ground.
Todd, can I ask a question? If you
Sure.
don't mind?
Yeah, please.
What is the what is that historically? Is that pretty even with historical stranded costs, or?
Yeah, and so that total division that total division is about $609,000, and we make about $49,000 in revenue. So that stranded cost is pretty on. This year, there's probably about a $20,000 to $25,000 new dollars in this budget, because we've picked up more maintenance in Memorial Park from the pond cleanings and from the addition of the bed along the public safety access road. So traditionally, that's about where we are. The big, and it's actually probably a reduction. I don't have that in front of me, John, but I know when I started, our organics line was well over $120,000, and we're now down to about 70 through staffing proposals, equipment purchases over the years. And so I've started to call around other departments. This is other communities. This is a good model. This is strong. Hope that answers that question.
John, we can provide some history there, but my strong sense is that number has not grown much. I mean, it's always been there, and it's gone up by probably inflationary type numbers, but also Todd's made some operational changes that have reduced the budget. So I wouldn't be surprised that number's been fairly flat over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And so again, kind of painting this picture of those 507 stranded costs, 1,000 stranded costs, our Parks division, the net is $560,000. And so all the other divisions that I highlighted before, even offset some of this 560, because we're down to the 507 as our next net taxpayer ask. And so everything is contributing to offsetting this parks budget. So Liam, if you move to the next one. So just to touch base on some of our restoration costs, and this is where the department kind of gets a little confusing, but there's a total of $294,787 in restoration costs here. So this first one, staffing, was partly mentioned in Mike's discussion for Public Works. Here's the other half of our offset split position at $33,197. But then also, just like at Public Works, we had an employee that retired in May of last year, and the decision was made to not backfill that position for cost saving measures. and backfill it, budget it for, funding it this April. We're still in the process of trying to hire that position now. It's a tough time to hire based on summer economies in the private sector. I just want to take a moment of, we would never have been able to survive those two cuts if we hadn't done our homework and projected that high school athletics would not have happened. And through the furlough process, all my full-time staff was at least pulling one shift on the parks ground to maintain at a level that people expect in the town. So these positions are restorative. And again, they were met between lack of high school sports and also furlough. In the program areas, the FY21 budget that we're in right now asked for $56,000 in summer camp. That amount of money covers the first 2 weeks of summer camp, trip supplies, and training. This budget for FY22 brings us back more towards our traditional number. Just for reference, in FY20, our summer camp budget was $351,000. This operation budget and the revenue projections have been lowered to meet the reduced student numbers we're going to be able to do in the school. Usually we're well over 400 students. We'll probably be closer to 300 this summer, just based on square footage and meeting those CDC guidelines for summer camp. With that said, we're very thankful to be back, and summer camp is full except for about 7 slots in our teen camp. So people are excited to have that back. Restoration costs in our equipment, parks and ground budget is a line we established actually my second year here, so 3 years ago. Equipment replacement line for $15,000. These are planned replacements for gators, riding mowers, things in that high dollar range that aren't into the CIP number of $30,000 to $60,000 when we're talking about trucks, tractors, and so forth. And then there's $8,900 in all the other divisions for equipment replacement lines. And then a big one for me, and it's in my mind, it's not a big number, but all the divisions we're proposing to reestablish $8,900 in training. That's training for 12 full-time employees and 80 part-time employees. That includes our summer camp training and our before and after care training. So those were all zeroed out last year. So that's bringing it back. And staff is good at trying to find cooperative ways to keep those costs down. Next slide, please. Again, mention the hub as a new division potential, and we're requesting a lease extension, and that exhibit is all in the book in page 143 to 146. Expenditures of 378, revenue of 200 for the net of 178, 481. Things that this will provide for us: this will provide space to resume previous senior programming levels, first and foremost. Presently, Martins Point is using their room in a different fashion. And Cindy, our coordinators, had conversations, not sure if and when that's going to become available. So this space would guarantee senior programming. Scarborough is probably one of the biggest, most diverse departments that does the least programming because of daytime space. We don't have great daytime space. We're not allowed in the schools, and there's not a lot of private opportunities that meet our needs. And so this will provide us some development of new programming, which we'll touch on later. More importantly, during that time frame, it supports the hardest hit people during the pandemic in terms of social isolation, seniors, stay-at-home parents, and teens. And we haven't really had a great programming selection for those, so that would provide that opportunity. It would address our annual lack of childcare space. Every year, we never meet the overflow need for childcare, and I'll touch on that in a minute. And this question was asked during our summer presentation. We talked about leasing this. And after we've been here for the 6 months, I'm going on 7. I do not see this space as our long-term solution to Parks and Recreation community service for the town of Scarborough. I see this as a placeholder as we go through some of these processes that you guys have touched on, how the school needs, library development. It keeps our place at the table, but it allows us to address the needs that we haven't been to. So it's an opportunity to do that. So, and I can elaborate further if folks have questions on that. Liam, can we move to the next slide, please? Another new initiative in this budget is contracted beach trash. Mike kind of touched on it, and Liam as well a little bit. hiring staff, especially seasonal and even more part-time seasonal, is becoming more challenging. So last summer we used our split position to do beach trash 5 days a week. We didn't have the funding to do the weekend trash through staff, so we ended up contracting it and researched that model. Some of you may recall the year before we took over 40 barrels off of Pine Point Beach, trying to reduce our trash impact and getting into more carry in, carry out model. What I'm proposing here is to take this model to go 7 days a week, and it allows our staff to meet, one, the backlog of repairs and general maintenance that we have in town, but two, especially reestablish our full-time staff to do skilled and perform those tasks without having to contract those services. In the past, we've spent about $37,000 just on seasonal beach trash. And so this is a reduction in the model and also provides some time to go in other areas. Next slide, if you would, Liam. Opportunities to move forward towards your budget goal. I think I got a little extra letter in my acronym there, but still waiting on potential federal stimulus money and what that may be able to be offset. There's some rumblings that we may be able to go after potential revenue loss from future years. During the pandemic year, we lost almost $700,000 in revenue between not having summer camp, childcare services, summer day camp, and youth sports. And so based on our tracking right now, I'm confident in our budget projections. Those things are all coming back. For this year, our childcare is full already for the fall, except for Wentworth. At Wentworth School, we can hold 100 students. We've set that cap at 75 and we're full. We have an established waiting list to fill the remaining slots. The challenge right now is finding enough staff to meet that extra need. And so we're gonna, as we hire a staff person, we'll add more spots into that site. So that's good. It's great for parents of Scarborough to get the need back. When I initially proposed my budget, we didn't have those numbers in to confirm. And so presently right now on the K-5 level, we have 18 students on the wait list. And I only see that growing as parents decide what's going on and they gain more confidence that our kids are going back to school for sure and not losing their situation that they've developed. And so potential overflow for childcare would be here at the hub. And if we had 30 students here, and like I said, we have 18 on the waiting list, that expenditure is just over $34,000. That's part-time staff, that's transportation, and a small supply line. Because we don't have to pay for a lease space at the school, that's an additional savings in my projection. But our revenue stays the same of $111,000. So that's a net impact to the overall budget of just over $76,000. So if that was brought into our budget, our new net projection for FY22 would be down to just over $430,000. And then just to touch base on budget cut impacts from the previous years. Again, we've all talked about it. Prioritizing work orders, so delay in parks and ground work orders especially. Reducing the quality of the ground maintenance, especially on less preventative maintenance, more reduction in some of those cultural services, iterating, overseeding. We've had to increase use in contracted services in certain areas when we've missed a mowing and we've had to bring in a private contractor because we just can't fit that extra mow in. When you're maintaining 5 outside parks in the geographics of Scarborough and the entire municipal athletic and park campus, our staff is tasked. There was impact on staff and program development when we didn't do training. That reduces opportunity, that reduces creativity, and it doesn't bring in new programming. And more importantly, and just hopefully people appreciate it. And I know everybody in my department was thankful to have their job and work through this, but it does create stress and fatigue on the remaining employees when you take away an employee and a half. Folks are doing different jobs. My administrative assistant spent 20 hours of her summer on a weed whacker and mower. I mean, they really stepped up. So I want to make sure that, and I appreciate Tom's kind words, but between the furlough and the hybrid care and even doing some of the public safety workers, childcare at the beginning, they've truly stepped up during this year. So couldn't be more proud, very thankful, glad I am part of this team. that is my presentation to you. I'm sure you have a lot of questions for me, but I really wanted to kind of spend the beginning of this just talking about how our budget operates and our net impact on the taxpayer. So.
Thank you, Todd. That was very fast and a lot of information.
Well, I know you said 6:30, and I figured there'd be a lot of questions. So
You're gonna try to hit that.
yeah.
I'll toss a couple out there just because. So with the ARPA funding, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of jumping around a little bit. You,
go ahead.
I think there's potential for 692,000. When do you think we might understanding if that's a reality or not?
Well, first of all, that was just the magnitude of our loss. So I'm not sure if we'd be qualifying for that amount. But there has been some rumor that there's been some potential cost recovery for municipalities. So I just wanted to show you how much we were impacted by program loss.
Yeah, if I could just jump in quickly. So again, one of the explicit, well, again, at least high level anyway, suggestions is that ARPA funds could be used for demonstrated COVID-related municipal revenue loss. And so we certainly believe, I mean, there's no denying the fact that we couldn't run summer camp, we couldn't run childcare, we had reductions in numbers. And so we did ask Todd to try to quantify what that figure would be. In terms of timing, again, I think May 10th is 60 days from when the legislation was passed. So we should have those specifics soon, but it's certainly a great opportunity, potentially anyway, for the council to look at utilizing some funds there.
Cool. But we need to see how the rules are written, basically.
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Interesting concept with the hub. I hadn't really understood the gap with the services that we're able to provide to seniors, particularly with Martin's Point repurposing their community room. So I appreciate you covering that. Then, kind of like I did with Public Works, just looking at your net in what you're asking for this year is 507,000. Looks like you've already lowered that to closer to 440. In FY20, you actually utilized 561. That's a reduction, actually. But I do notice that your numbers go up and down from year to year. I think there's more variability because you're a more nimble organization, right? You can pivot when needed, like in the past couple of years, when you're going to have a drastic reduction in revenue, you can offset that with staff costs pretty easily, or I shouldn't say easily, but readily.
And it's all relative, John, too, in the sense where, and that's why I was kind of focusing on the Parks and Rec side of things, is that's really the stranded cost where when we try to hold projects to the end of the year to make sure we're meeting revenues and that's the only place we can go, because every time we make a cut somewhere else in those shaded areas, it directly affects revenue production. And so because we have a cost model of break even or profit in certain areas, it's a detriment to the overall bottom line.
And actually, I have one more question. It relates to, it's accounting, really. Why are we renting space from the school department, but not charging for services that we provide? Like the turf and track, for example, right? I don't know what's happening with it now, but you've taken care of that facility, right?
Yeah, I mean, we take care of, and so like I mentioned, without going into a deep dive, is those are decisions that previous council and school boards have made. There's policies and procedures that we follow. Every school's priority one on rentals, field use, and then I program with my staff based on what's available afterwards. And so it's an ongoing discussion. Tom and I have started that. We have made the commitment to, once we get through this operational budget, to sit down. But yeah, so everything on the municipal campus, turf, high school softball field, baseball, middle school Wentworth, is all funded by that $560,000 net ask to the taxpayer, including utilities, ball field lights, game lights. And a lot of these things we don't have control over it. And that's just the way it is. That's the system that's designed. I think there's conversations to be had, but I don't tell the athletic director how many times he can turn the ball field lights on. If he flicks that thing on in April, I pay a bill. It's just the system that's in place. And I think there's space to talk about it. We didn't feel it was appropriate in this late in the day to have that conversation.
I agree. It's just something to kind of track towards for the future, I think, in that it'd be good to create some alignment there where you,
Yeah, John, I intend to start up my conversation with the superintendent, well, not start, but with the new superintendent talking about this very topic. This is the one area, I think we do a pretty good job elsewhere. IT is a good example. There was a time where they used to pay rent for the space they occupy upstairs in this building. That was, of course, when it was covered as a qualified expense through the EPS model. This is the one area that we don't do good internal accounting for. I'm not sure if it's going to matter to the taxpayer because it's coming out of the other pocket, but it's still going to the bottom line.
And if I could, just to point out two things, and Betsy had asked this question in one of the previous sessions that I was watching, just for educational purposes, that my staff reserves all the space inside and out. Anytime we take a reservation inside, which is work we're doing, coordinating with the school on custodial and space availability, that revenue generated goes to the school side. We don't see a penny of that revenue generated on that. So that's, again, another piece of it. But Betsy asked more importantly, I think it was about the turf revenue. Anytime we rent the turf, those funds go directly into the turf reserve account annually. That's not something that you see in my net calculation here. And over years, that's gone down because of access to the turf, but then also everybody else is building turf. So there's less rental opportunities. So I just wanted to answer Betsy's question that I think she asked before about reserve accounts that I think I heard in one of the previous sessions.
thank you. My 6 minutes is up. Go ahead, Jonathan. Betsy, you're up. Go ahead.
Yeah, so, hey, Todd.
Hi, Betsy.
I did have a couple more questions on reserve funds. So the last year on the revenues, if people are following along, the budget book is page 198. We projected 2.26, not projected, but we had a budget of 2.26 million. And it looks like Ruth is projecting year end is going to be 1.429. So how is that revenue going to be made up? That was made up through your cuts. The revenue loss was made up through your operational cuts.
Yeah, so at the beginning of this year, when we started tracking our numbers, and again, childcare is the biggest, when we made this budget, we didn't know that school wasn't going back to
Right.
the system that they're in. So I've held spending with my department for the past couple months. They have to call when they want to ask for anything outside the normal. And so we've been trying to, really try to offset that cost with not filling in projects, not ordering supplies. And so we're trying to close that gap as best we can. That's our one method right now. And as we get going too here, as summer camp starts to happen, we'll see a flex of income around beach passes. We usually collect about $100,000 in beach passes in May and June, just over little. So those monies will start coming in to try to offset that. So we've tried to make those reduction measures in holding of spending.
Right. So, but we still expect to be off by about, is it around $400,000, Tom? Or so if we had a budget projection that we were going to make a net revenue in 2021 of 78,262, but we're projecting now a net budget of 474. How is the difference going to be made up? So were we overspent from what we thought we would be from the projected, or are we on target, or based on all the changes we made, or?
Well, first off, I'm not sure I don't have familiarity and necessarily confidence in the 21 projection for revenue here.
Okay.
I think that frankly should be further scrutinized. Todd may have a higher degree of confidence. But to Todd's credit, he saw this coming. I mean, it was no great surprise. And so as I recall, late January, he instituted a department-wide curtailment. I think he does have, with that foresight, have the ability to not realize the revenue, but to control his expenses. So he stays hopefully within budget.
Okay.
And as he said, there will be some late arriving revenues that will increase that number. So we're hopeful those two things together will be a somewhat soft landing spot.
And so last year we projected revenue of 2.26 million. And this year, we're projecting an increase over that. So can you talk me through the 7.4% increase in revenue? I see like beach revenue going up. It seemed like the beaches were highly used during COVID and all that. Are we raising the fees or?
No, and good question. So Tom and I chatted about that just a few weeks ago about should we be raising the fees? And based on my past experience, when I first got here, I was asked to do a fee study, and we'll do a fee study over the summer when everybody's in operation, make that proposal to council because you guys set fees during the fall and winter. And the major factor is we just not have a time to educate folks, beachgoers, on if there was an increase needed. My staff took it hard when we went to $15 for a day pass without more than a couple of weeks of education. So people need to understand. We'll do a study again like I did 3 years ago. What are people charging for season passes, resident, non-resident, those type of services, and then I'll be able to come back to you to raise that. Other areas you can see in this budget, the number is up. Part of that is projection of new revenue in the hub, which offsets some of that as an increase. I have gone through and made budget decreases in certain areas where summer camp is lower than it was from FY20. Childcare, I left the same as our FY20 projection because we met it in previous years. There is no, based on how we use the space within the schools, we'll be back to full childcare numbers, even at the 3 feet space restriction, if that stays. That's no impact to childcare. So we filled all those numbers at all the elementary schools. And again, like I said, we're waiting on Wentworth. Big drops is like this $50,000 reduction in summer camp. I mean, that's a huge hit to revenue this year from previous summers, just because we can't have as many kids as we normally have. Senior field trips, we usually bring in about 30. I'm only projecting 10 in revenue because I don't see us taking on that risk early in the season. I mean, maybe more towards FY22 before we start running senior trips. And let's see, are there any other big ones there? Some small stuff, some youth sports revenues projections I've lowered by $3,000 to $5,000. Just because not sure on what the impact is. Now I could be wrong and we could get everybody back, Betsy, but I didn't want to overcommit.
Well, I was just trying to understand. So the childcare line is traditionally what we've done at Wentworth. Is that correct?
The childcare line is traditionally what we've done at our sites of the 3 elementary schools.
Schools in Wentworth. And then we're expecting, and who are these kids that will be in the hub additional than the kids that are at the 3 elementary schools at Wentworth?
Yeah, so good question. So right now we have certain capacities that I don't have them in front of me, where Wentworth is 75, the Blue Point Gymnasium maybe 36, Acorn is maybe 42 kids. And so once we've hit those numbers based on spatial requirements, we start a waiting list. And so those students will be offered the opportunity. We still need to kind of iron out the details on transportation, but between our buses and the school, who've always been a good partner on transportation, figure out a way to get those kids here. And if I'm a parent and I have to drive, usually I go to Blue Point, but I got to pick up at the hub versus going somewhere else outside of the community, I think it's a service level that we've been trying to meet for years.
And we've always had turned people away from that program. We've never had capacity. The hub gives us, for the first time ever, an opportunity to deal with that waiting list.
Right. Yeah, I do think, the senior sadly is still going to be, badly hit. So I did notice you still have a fair, it's, small potatoes compared to the overall budget, but you're still thinking bus trips. We have in the mini part-time pay. I know we're just kind of even struggling now to get people to attend meetings at this point. It's definitely a community that's been challenged, and so I hope the programs come back, but I kind of think that of all the programs that might not come back, the seniors may be one more year out.
Yeah, I respectively, I would disagree. I get phone calls all the time. I got 2 today from seniors. When are we starting? I've got my shots. I'm by my 2-week window. When are we going? And so, for me to have the ability to program and spend, I need appropriation authority to you. If you'll notice in this year's spending, We didn't spend those. So even though we asked for the bus driver, we didn't spend that money. It's there. It's part of the offset for the next budget. So, but we are planning to move forward. And that's why you see, I mean, the FY20 senior budget was, excuse me, I flipped my page. I want to say it was around $132,000, and I think I'm proposing 112 this year. So I have made certain adjustments.
Certain adjustments.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I hope it works. So, how much is in the recreation reserve fund right now? And
What,
does that include, like, I know it's beach parking, and then, you know, there's the recreation fee that we're charging for new construction. Was it $250 for multi-family and $500 for single family or something?
so
Does all
there,
that go into one pot, or does it
Yeah.
go into two
So
different pots?
there's three reserve accounts, and they go to separate. One is the beach reserve account, and the number that's in Munis, you know, and Ruth always is going to raise her eyebrows at me because it doesn't take off interest or spending. But the number that I can see is about just over $164,000 in beach reserve, and that's got a stricted code that goes with it, how that can be used and what it can be spent on. I've already mentioned the church reserve, and to the account you're referring to, it's the impact reserve account from new development. There's about $171,000 in that account right now. But any of those reserve use have specific guidelines, and then we have to come to you. Tom would have to propose to council how we use those. And so it's part of the budget process. Right now, I hadn't made any proposals to use the impact development because it's really supposed to be for new projects, new initiatives is kind of the guidelines there that I understand. And our biggest struggle right now is maintenance and restoration of those things to try to keep up with what we have.
The hub seems pretty new. Yeah, I know. You know, I did ask when I first came online, and it would be good if we had it for these, when these were established. And I think we have some really old reserve funds that were established that we couldn't find the wording and, you know, what they're supposed to be for. So I'm hoping for these three that we do have those. Go ahead, John. I only had one last question, but I've got it scribbled down and I got to flip pages. So if you had something,
Yeah.
I won't waste time.
So Todd, I watched the school board meeting last week and watched Todd Jepson talk a little bit about kind of their facilities needs for next year. And he had mentioned that he has been talking with you about potentially using the House of Lights for overflow space if they need it in order to open the schools full-time safely next year. Just curious, have you guys, where is that conversation today? Sure. And has there been consideration of how that space could be supported through federal grant money if there's a partnership between the town and the schools to potentially share that space at the hub?
Todd, I'll handle it if you like.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we did meet with our colleagues in the school at their request. They were doing a system-wide for themselves, their own facilities evaluation of how they could fit students respecting the three-foot distance requirements. And as part of that, they're also looking at other space, just as kind of contingency considerations. The hub was talked about specifically. Alger Hall was talked about. There were a number of private locations as well. Since then, we've heard from the assistant superintendent that they've determined that they can actually do it safely within their walls. So we don't see the need for that. I think it would qualify if they were going to be using it for school purposes. I think it probably would qualify for federal money, frankly, but it doesn't appear to be needed at this point.
Okay. That kind of stinks from at least the federal money side of the house, but it's good that the schools, I guess, are able to work within their own walls at this point. So that's good. You know, you had mentioned earlier, and I might have missed it, that, you know, the hub isn't the long-term facilities plan for community services. So what is that today? Like, what is the plan going forward? I mean, how are you thinking the hub is going to be something that's needed for the next 2-3 years, or what's the strategy there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a bigger conversation, John, than time we have right now. For us, it's, we went through this, well, we started this community center exercise that we spent countless volunteer and staff hours on, kind of got paused by COVID. And then having the discussion. And so with school development provides an opportunity. And then also with the library, what their choices are. Nancy had mentioned looking at the Downs, which potentially opens up the library if that space gets translated. So there's conversations going on in the background. When I say that I don't see the hub as a long-term fix, is that I think we can provide new services as long as you need us to here. But I'm confident that as programming grows, some of the challenge in this building without some major renovation is sound. It's a wide open building. You hear somebody. So when you look at my temporary schedule, a draft schedule for this place, you see I've got things in different areas to try to reduce some of that sound conflict. And parking is limited here. So if you were holding a larger event, I think there's 40 spots here. And so we could fill 40 spots here for a senior lunch. And so just some of those challenges, how we meet that. We've started to strategize. There's other large parking lots here. We've shuttled for senior lunch before from Martins Point from the school. So we have metrics to how to offset those. But I think once we start programming and I turn my staff loose, you're going to see programming that we haven't been able to do. And so it's how many we can offer and what that looks like. So I think that's part of a master plan strategy of where we end up, what makes sense along the way. And I did put next year's budget, some monies to master plan to kind of see where we were. Didn't think it was prudent in this budget cycle.
Yeah, John, so we're not conceding defeat. I think this community needs and deserves a facility at some point. I think we're recognizing the likelihood of us building a brand new facility at $20+ million is simply not going to happen. I think there's greater community needs, frankly. And so more than likely, the opportunity will be in repurposing an existing town or school facility. Ideally, probably one or more of the K2s if their consolidated plan goes forward. So the hub is really kind of a position to hold an opportunity for Todd and his staff to start to do some programming they've never had a chance to do, to wait for some of those opportunities to unfold.
So if for some reason the hub didn't advance, is it really an impact to new programming that would be impacted? Or like, Todd, would you still be able to deliver the same quality of programming pre-COVID without the hub?
Well, not without Martins Point. So first of all, we hardly did any daytime programming at all because we had no daytime space besides Martins Point. And then it's all hinging on when we can get back into that community room. They've repurposed it. Cindy's had numerous conversations kind of following along with it. They're not sure when they're going to come out of this model. So we could be ready to go and not have no space to put our seniors in. And especially with the school spreading out, that's reduced even options there. So it would be a challenge to do what we did before.
So it's really the senior programming that would likely be impacted the most, John.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
That's all the questions I had.
you'd still be able to do the trips. I guess it's just the space for the lunches is a huge challenge. We did talk about whether or not we could use that large space in the public safety building. It's a sort of a big community area. There are some challenges with it, but it is a big space. So, it's a new big space, I guess, that we didn't have in the past.
Alger Hall isn't suitable for senior programming. I know there's still work to be done, but even once that work is done, could the senior programming take place there?
I think it may be, but there's some ADA issues that need to be attended to first. But I think it does have potential. Parking is a huge limitation there. Again, we can be creative around that, but I think there's some potential.
Well, thank you, Todd, and thank you to John and Betsy. We're a little bit over time. I'm not sure if anybody from the public is here, but I'd like to open it up for public comment if anybody would like to say anything.
We have two members of the public. If they would like to speak, they can raise their hands. Otherwise, seeing nothing.
Okay. Well, with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn so that we can see each other again in 25 minutes.
So moved.
Second,
Colette, would you take the call?
Yes. Counselor Calucci,
Yes.
Counselor Anderson,
Yes.
Counselor Glystein,
yes.
motion passes.
All right.